Hard introduction.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Nasser. This is the Cleveland C#VB.NET User Group. We meet here every fourth week of the month. Meetings are free of charge and open to the public, open to all levels of expertise, from students, working pros, as well as retirees and hobbyists. Everyone should have got an email form, and we'll be collecting those at the end of the presentation. Just a couple overhead items. Restrooms, if needed, are directly opposite of the elevators. The ladies will require a key, which is available on the other desk. If you would, please put your cell phones on vibrate, and we'll go ahead and get started. The meeting will go for approximately an hour and a half, and then we'll wrap it up with the evals and some prizes, courtesy by Nito. And then we usually meet over at Slyman's for networking afterwards. And Tech Systems will be sponsoring the get-together afterwards for with appetizers and drinks. So highly encourage you all to come out. Already getting rave reviews. I'd like to give a big thank you to DePaul University for donating the space each and every month. And also like to give a big thank you to Nito for sponsoring the pizza and drinks. And more importantly, a big thank you to our speaker who came in from Pittsburgh today and fought traffic and lots of other headaches, Carol Smith. Carol is a UX designer. Let's hear it for Carol one more time. So Carol is a UX designer and is a former Clevelander and is now a transplanted Pennsylvania, living in Pittsburgh. But he says that with love. She works on the IBM Watson project. And today she's going to be discussing how to build a great user experience. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Carol.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty high level. If anyone actually has taken a lot of coursework or studied this area a lot, some of these things should be good refreshers for you. And please ask questions as we go. We have plenty of time this evening, and I've got a lot to cover, but at the same time, I want to make sure I answer your questions. So I already had some questions about internationalization, and if you have time, we'll have a conversation about that. I don't cover that at all, actually. I had to cut something, so great. So everything is designed. So everything in this room, someone has designed it. They may not have thought much about it. They may not have put much effort into it. They may not have had design in their title. It may just have been the default because that's what they had, but everything is designed. Pencils and the chairs that you're sitting on, fancy chairs at the nice Mexican restaurant, anything around you has been designed. A teapot. This is a specific teapot from the Design of Everyday Things by Donald Norman. And the idea with this is it's actually not usable, but it was designed and it's very attractive. It doesn't mean it works. So it's the process. Design is actually a process. You have to think about what the constraints are. So you have to identify the constraints, classify them, and really figure out what are we building here? Which constraints are we going to deal with? Art, on the other hand, has less constraints. There's the constraints of the canvas, potentially. There are other types of constraints, but they're not usually a business constraint or a technology constraint. You may be constrained by the colors you have, or the paintbrushes that you have, or the pottery type, something like that, but other people usually are not imposing constraints on you. So design has to have constraints. Some of them are non-negotiable. Technology, for example. Sometimes we have to figure out, okay, given the situation, we have to satisfy these specific constraints. Some of them are negotiable, so we can figure out a better navigation. We can figure out better designs for this problem that we're trying to solve. And working amongst that is a lot of what designers have to figure out how to do. The principles that I'm going to be covering today aren't specifically these, but keep these in mind while I'm talking today. And the interaction needs to be natural. It should be appropriate. It should fit the problem. So if somebody, for example, is trying to pay bills, the interaction that you create should follow along a natural bill-paying process. It should fit. It should be consistent, but not in the way that consistency can be negative and that everything's exactly the same, but rather in a way that doesn't provide surprises. Unless it's something that should be surprising for Halloween, it shouldn't have a lot of surprises for the users. It should be expected and consistent in that way. It should be supportive and give them the information that they need to be successful, health features, top-ups, things like that, but when they're appropriate, when they're needed. And it should be flexible. So if they have a different preference, turning on or off a particular feature, being able to turn off the sound, for example, on your phones, that's an important feature of your phone. that allows you to be able to enjoy a movie without interrupting the audience. So why are some experiences so much better? That's what we're going to talk about today, or some of the aspects that really bridge the difference between, kind of a crappy chair that you're uncomfortable in for 2 hours sitting here, and a chair that you're like, I didn't even notice that chair. That was a great chair. That's the type of experience you want to create. The type where people are like, I use that app all the time. I don't even think about it because it just works. So the designs are better because they follow design practices, best practices as far as what is reasonable and acceptable for design. They're also better because of a clear focus on specific users. The best designs are actually built for specific people. So an example I often use is Basecamp. How many of you are familiar with Basecamp? A few of you anyway? It's a project management tool. I hate it. It really doesn't work for me. But they make millions of dollars a year because it works really well for other people. It's a really well-designed product for a lot of people, just not me. And that's okay. It's not meant for me. I just have to use it for certain projects I work on. And I'm sure the tools that you use every day I don't use every day. I'm a PC person. Most designers are Mac people. And different things work for different people, but being able to choose what works for you is important as well. The ability to learn and to be able to iterate quickly, that's on us. For us to be able to learn from our users, for us to be able to figure out what isn't working and fix it, and do that in a reasonable manner. If we are slowed down by a lot of process and bureaucracy, that means that the changes are going to get to us much more slowly. In some situations, that speed, that slow speed, is important for whatever reason, but in many cases, that actually just hurts the users because they're not seeing change. If a product doesn't change after a year of being out on the market, users are going to think you just don't care. And that's something that's important when we talk about that. So the design best practices. So cognitive psychology is where it all starts. It's how our brains work. Humans are humans, and we bring ourselves to every experience we encounter, whether we want to or not. And we acquire, perceive, and store information from all of our senses. And we also transform, use, and communicate with information. We're manipulating that information. We're taking the inputs, and then we're doing something with it. And the senses, of course, sight, hearing, you're very familiar with those. Those are the primary ones we're talking about with digital interactions. You're not tasting, touching, and smelling so much with the digital interactions yet. But definitely with hearing, as far as especially the use of screen readers and the things in your phone and things like that, and obviously the sight for people who are visually able. So we use our senses to acquire information. We also use our knowledge, so the things that we have in our brain that we carry with us, the class that you took, some previous experiences that you had. You relate all those previous experiences to what's occurring now. So I'm familiar with paying a bill. Now I'm going to pay a bill on a different site. I would expect something to be recognizable. I would expect these things to be similar. And everything that we do is, of course, through these past experiences. Our inputs are put into our systems in different ways. There's sensory memory, there's short-term memory, and long-term memory. Most of you probably wish you had more of some of these. The sensory memory is your ability to sit here in this room and ignore the blowing you might hear from the fan. You're going to be able to ignore that during this session. Most of you will be able to anyway. Some of you may not be able to, but that's your brain just kind of cutting out some of the annoyances. It's the same idea as if you're at a cocktail party, like these happy crowds, and you're able to focus on one conversation at a time. And that can be impaired in a variety of different ways if you've had a brain injury or a hearing problem or something like that. But for the most part, humans are able to change the way they're perceiving things without even realizing. Our our sensory memory just cuts that out for us and helps us to keep moving. It replaces that old information. So you may not remember that this room had a blowy sounding something to talk about. You may not remember that something in the hallway made noise when they came to pick up the trash or something. Short-term memory, on the other hand, is something that you'll remember, but you won't remember it for very long. You'll remember a phone number long enough to dial it. You may remember it all day, but you're unlikely to remember it the next day, unless it's one that you do constantly, consistently. We all wish we had more short-term memory. I certainly do, but it's very short. It's usually a very short piece of information as well. Chunking is a concept that you'll hear in cognitive psychology. It's the idea that we can remember 7 items, plus or minus. So if you're trying to memorize a shopping list, if it's 20 items, there's going to become a point where you're going to have trouble remembering those last few items on the list. Some people are a little better than others, but for most of us, 7 items we're doing pretty well. If we get to 9, we're doing really well, and the rest of it is going to need to be written down. Yes, yes, and I don't know scientifically if they knew that when they developed the 7 or not. I think they did, but yeah, exactly. That's why they're that way. Yep, probably. So long-term memory is when things get transferred. Hopefully, these are things that we remember over and over again. But long-term memory is harder for us to pull from. So remembering passwords.
You might be able to remember 2 or 3 passwords that are really important that you use every day. Your work one, your bank one, Facebook, something like that. Something that you use a lot. But there's a point where you just can't remember them all. And then you use LastPass, or you write them all down, or you do something to remember all those different passwords. And when we require users to keep a lot of things in their memory that they need to use, our systems start to fail. Karen Spool, who's a very talkative designer, he talks a lot about how security is basically a failure right now in our systems because of this, because we require users to remember passwords, and then what do? They write them down. They put them in the drawer. They put them on a Post-it note right there, right? That's a failure. Security is a farce if we are relying on their memory to get themselves into these systems. And so think about that when you're designing a system. Do I want my user to have to remember all this stuff when I know they can't? Or do I want them to recall or recognize? Recognition is easier and better for people. So recognition is, remember you guys, the red, whatever it is, it's But you can provide support to them in the world support. That's actually product pages.
That's what they said, but they're actually all moving away from it. Because really, it was a bit too much. Yeah, they tried. It was an interesting attempt. Yeah. And there are complications because of our abilities. So many of us have eye issues. A lot of us are wearing eyeglasses. Some of us may have additional issues that cause us problems with sight. Hearing can be a problem. We may not always notice the ding or whatever it is that we're supposed to. Tactile senses, so if you have arthritis or Parkinson's, moving your mouse over a specific area on a screen may be extremely difficult or impossible depending on how it's designed. And we sometimes have mental disabilities as well. So ADHD, dyslexia, there are lots of different complications that can change the way we perceive information from the typical person. These are things to consider. Any questions? All right, so Gestalt. How many of you ever heard of Gestalt? Yeah, a few. Okay, good. So this is the idea of, there's a lot of different theories within Gestalt. The idea is that people perceive the whole, that we really look at something and we get a lot of information very quickly from it, some of it right and some of it wrong, of course, but that we're looking at the whole pieces. So elements of design, you don't have to, you can't read this, but there are a variety of different pieces that fit within the best practices of design as well as Gestalt. Line, color, size, and space are all different aspects that a designer or you can use to emphasize, de-emphasize, to help people realize what's important on a page, just to make something look attractive. These are all different controls, levers, if you will, of design. And when they're used properly, they can really help your design a great deal. And when they aren't used in the right way, they can actually make your design very unappealing and actually unusable. Principles of design are another aspect where we're actually thinking about how do we structure the information in a way that people are going to see meaning in it. So, for example, alignment. When you align certain things, you can direct someone's eyes to something specific. You can point out where things are grouped more closely together through proximity. Repetition can show a pattern that you want people to draw their eyes to, that you want their attention on. These are all different aspects of design. Closure is one that's really interesting. It's our mental ability to look at something that's not complete and we still see a shape. We can still see something recognizable. You'll see this a lot, especially in advertising and print design. This is used a lot
to convey something interesting. It's interesting to look at, visually stimulating, and so it's going to draw your attention a little bit more, and you can figure it out. Your eyes see this as a little bit of a puzzle, so it's more interesting. So it's something that you can bring into your designs as well. Symmetry, beautiful Taj Mahal uses symmetry. These are a lot of very ancient ideas, actually, that have just been given names in the past couple hundred years. And does anyone know what this is? Yeah, there are actually three potential names. So the golden rule, the golden, what was it? Mean. The rule of thirds comes from more of a photography world. Agile cards, exactly, and Fibonacci sequence. So all these things are now a mathematician can point out to you the differences, but technically they're all very related. The idea that balance and using math to actually divide your visual space can help you to create more beautiful experiences. So the idea is that you take these two little boxes, they're the same, and then you weigh together these two, and then these two add up to this one, and on, and each one is cumulatively larger than the previous set. And so you also get the lovely cards that we use for agile estimation if you do agile processes in groups. This is all, math and all these lovely things coming together. Yes?
What are those numbers representing? Area flows or something else?
So that's a good question. I actually can't answer that, except that the smallest one is 0 and 1, 1.
It's the size of the lane.
Is it the long one? It's the ratio, but there's actually a different number mathematically. It's like 1.688 or something. The first two are, exactly, so it starts with 0, and then 1, 1, and then 2, and, well, Fibonacci, it starts with 0. But yeah, not possible. These are all loosely related, again, but the idea, again, is that taking that mathematical idea, breaking down your space, as you saw in the plant here, this beautiful curve is actually mathematically meaningful as well.
Well, it occurs a lot of places in nature. It's actually the ratio between your forearm and your upper arm.
Yeah, exactly.
The Romans used it in their architecture.
And you can use it in quilting as well. This quilt is the Fibonacci quilt. A lot of quilters actually use this to help them to plan out what their quilt is. It's used in lots of different ways. And there was some images of Leonardo da Vinci's paintings also, where he was using that to lay out entire, paint's massive, but there are many, many instances of the golden ratio in there. So, tell me what you see when you look at this.
Either a base or two faces of each face.
Yeah, different people will see different things. Some people will only see the base and not be able to see the faces, and vice versa. There's another one. So there's a saxophone, a person playing the saxophone. Here's the saxophone. Some people have a lot of trouble seeing this. Here's the mouthpiece down to the base of it, and then there's a face. Here's your eye. It's really hard for some people to see that one. So this is figure ground. This is figure ground where you're using the color differentiations for people to see something in the image. So lots of different things you can do with design to wake people's brains up, but they're also beautiful and fun to play with. Any questions before I move on? Comments? Hopefully you're a little bit more. Okay, so style guides. How many of you have worked with a style guide happily or unhappily? Very few, okay. So style guides, they're also, they're different words for this particular idea, but the basic idea is that there is a document, a website, something that has the truth, the colors, the font sizes, whatever it is going to be, what it should look like consistently to maintain that consistency. And it's so that the same design is used across the website, across multiple products. So I work, as you mentioned, at Watson, and we have, I'll talk about this in a little bit, but we're moving to a new system called Carbon Design. So we're all going to move all of our products, we have a lot of them, over this new system. And it's going to promote consistency, but it's a big pain. But once we're done, we will not have to worry about making changes to every single page because the changes will actually take care of it. If you use CSS, it's the same idea. That's case style sheets. Yeah.
I've been working in this automation for many, many years.
Uh-huh.
And one of the, I've been dealing with this like every day. And one of the, I remember we had a debate one time. Color red green.
Right.
Which
red?
Red.
Yeah.
So if you are on a platform, you want to show that something is stopped. Do you use red or do you use green?
Ah.
And Honeywell uses green. Everybody else uses red. So the reason why Honeywell uses green is because it's safe. Everybody uses red because they say, well, it's stopped. Honeywell uses red when it's telling me that it's danger. Everybody else uses green,
Right.
meaning that it's running.
Right. So a new operator coming into that plant may be very confused initially about what's going on in the land and why lights are on colors and that sort of thing. So it's an interesting, and that's something W3C for the web really promotes a lot of standards. And it's easier on the web than it is in manufacturing or for individual software products specifically, and making standards.
So there's a whole standard now
Yeah.
in automation, just what colors to use. So when you go from one facility to another one, you know what these colors are.
Good. So are they all using which one?
They're all using red for meaning that it's stopped, and green meaning that it's running.
Ah! So Honeywell was right.
So
Honeywell was wrong. Okay. I get it. Okay.
What do you do for color coding?
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Green is that, okay. Or flashing maybe in a solid color for, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a good example of somebody doing something stupid? Now, Honeywell, more people are familiar with stoplights than any other thing.
Right.
And stoplights, lights always stop.
Yeah.
But some person in some field can say, no, let's make it green. That can stop.
But if you go to Canada, if you go to Japan, they use the opposite color.
For stoplights?
No. For
In the manufacturing. Yeah.
For when you go.
That's what I think. Because more people
Well, it is the culture.
Yeah.
It is the culture to how people do.
Yeah. And again, that's why aligning on standards is so important, so that it's pretty obvious what, even if it may not be the ideal, it's at least everybody's agreed on this. And a lot of the standards and a lot of style guides are basically that. They're an agreement. It's an agreement that we're going to do this. We may not all agree that it's the best thing. We may not have complete agreement, but we at least agree to use this so that we have consistency, so that we are making a usable product that people will recognize. So that's what the red and the green means.
So like for example, new product, we have alarm checks, events. And we decided that no matter where we go, the alarm's going to be one color, warning's going to be another color, and zero events are going to be a different color. So it's always the same color, always the same background. Plus, it's always the same action. When you click on it, it always is the same action.
So that's an example of a good, reliable interaction, especially in manufacturing. Lives are at stake in a lot of cases, so you want consistency there. And with the style guide, with anything in design, the important thing is that you're consistent with what people are doing, so safety, things like that, and not necessarily being consistent just for consistency's sake. So if you're in a situation where it really would not make sense to have the red and green switched in that case, you would want to adjust for that situation. Particularly if you're in Japan, it sounds like they do manufacturing in a different way. You would not change it to be like the American style or the North American style if that would potentially put people at risk. So this is a little bit more about carbon design. I mentioned this, and that basically the whole idea of a style guide is just a collection of reusable components. Some visual designers get a little upset because it reduces the amount of creativity they can use with regard to colors and sizes and things like that, but at the same time it gives them more power to spend time on more interesting problems. And that's why I always tell my visual designers when they get a little complainy about this. For one, you're not going to have to do comps anymore. Comps are like the official, like this is what it should look like, because everybody will prefer the style guide, which means you can spend more time figuring out something really interesting instead of wasting your time putting colors on a piece of paper that people are going to look at for 2 seconds and then not need anymore, which is amazing.
Similar to Microsoft's new fluid design?
I'm not familiar with that. Maybe.
That's fine.
A lot of different organizations are coming up with systems like these, like design systems is another word for them. So it very well could be. It needs to be easily maintained and easy to update. Otherwise, it's a waste as well. So if something happens and you know that you need to change a pattern, you need to change a font size, you find out through usability testing that people are having difficulty reading or something like that, you need to change it. It needs to be able to be changed very quickly across the board, or else you're going to end up with inconsistencies anyway, because some designer, some developer, somebody's going to say, this is crap, we just need to change it, and then all of a sudden you've got all this variety because you didn't keep up with the style guide. So they're only as good as they can be when they are updated regularly. Graceful documentation. Do you guys remember this term? It was really popular about 15 years ago. Now I'm talking about responsiveness. They're not the same thing. I'm not implying that they are. But the general idea is that if I turn off JavaScript, if I turn off images, if I disable my screen, am I able to still navigate? Am I able to still get to the information that's being provided through this app, through this website, through whatever it is? It's the idea that the data remains there, even if the site isn't actually working the way it's supposed to, even if the application isn't actually working the way it's supposed to. And that's the general idea. With responsiveness, the idea is that I can look at a gigantic screen and see potentially everything I'd ever want, but if I have my tiny little phone screen, I can still see the most important things. The most important things are at the top of the page, the top of the screen, and I have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to get to the most important thing. The navigation's not stuck at the bottom somewhere. The important information isn't stuck at the bottom. So both of these are just ways of talking about making sure that if somebody is having a bad internet speed, or again, turns off images or whatever it is, they're still going to have a reasonable experience. It's not going to be the same, but it's reasonable. So let's talk a little bit about user experience. So user experience as a field has been influenced by a lot of different areas. I've been talking about psychology, I've been talking about art concepts, which are quite a bit older than UX. User experience has been around for give or take 50, 60 years, depending on where you consider the influences for starting. It started out a lot in the government, actually. So thinking about how do we build a aircraft that someone is not going to crash immediately. A lot of it was in aerospace. Xerox PARC out in California, that was one of the places where a lot of this was initially done as well, on copiers and things like that. And so slowly but surely the field has been growing and building, and more recently has become very, very familiar to a lot of people, but until probably about 10 or 15 years ago, very few people worked with it. It's influenced by all these different areas. Programs are called human-computer interaction often, and that's the idea of a human interacting with some sort of digital experience. And it's about 4 different basic areas. So there's a functional experience that people have, sensorial, emotional, as well as their social experience, interacting with other people. Functionally, some of you who are doing Agile may recognize this as a Kanban board. Functionally, it's the ability to get things done. Getting to submit whatever it is, paying that bill, whatever you need to get done, minimally, the product should allow you to do that. That's the first priority. Let me get my stuff done so I can move on to something else. Sensorial is whatever it is that you're experiencing, both what you bring to the product as well as what it delivers to you. So what kind of colors and layouts? Is it fun and exciting? Does it look like a boring business app? What is this experience that I'm having based on what has been designed? Emotionally, how do I feel coming to this? Am I very nervous because I'm putting in an application for a gigantic loan that I probably can't afford? Or am I very excited because I'm finally buying that pair of jeans I've been waiting to buy? What are they, what are they experiencing? How can you help them be supported if they need support? How can you help to engage them? Thinking about their emotional state of mind, likely anyway, you can't always guarantee what it is, but the likely state of mind and being able to balance that with your design is really important. And then the social interaction. People usually nowadays are interacting somehow. They might be chatting through a chatbot. They may be literally speaking with their friends on Facebook Messenger or something like that. They may be interacting via their phone. Somehow people are interacting now. Most systems have some sort of interaction. And what is that like? What is the natural feel? If it's a chatbot, if it's something being generated, what should the voice be? What should that experience be like? Who were they talking to? What's the voice of that? And so all these things where they overlap, that's really the experience. That's what they're actually having. They're having this, they're trying to get something done, they've got all these emotions, they're sensing different things. All this brings together, whatever you create brings all that together. And usability is just the degree to which something is actually able to support their ability to get something done. It's maybe a term you've heard before. The User Experience Professionals Association used to be called the Usability Professionals Association, but the word is hard to explain to a lot of people. But it's still an important piece of it. It's, can I actually use this thing to do the thing I need to do? That teapot, for example, is not going to be very usable. Pretty, not usable. And so the aspects are, again, the ability to complete tasks, being effective and efficient in completing that task, being able to learn how the system works without a huge book. So IBM used to put out red books, and at least one or two of you have experienced a red book. I pity you for having to read that. I'm sorry, I apologize. I do not speak for IBM, but I do apologize for that. They're huge, huge manuals that people were expected to read. It's not fair. It's not a fair way to treat another human being.
Until recently, pilots had to carry around 30
Right.
pounds of flight manuals.
And the cognitive load there, to be able to be expected to understand that and then to apply it to a system, it's just not fair. So we need to think about that. The systems need to be learnable, pleasant to use and engaging. Wouldn't that be nice if all the systems we use were pleasant and engaging? And then that we feel that we have some control and are supported in that experience. That we don't feel that we're being left out or that we have no idea what's going on. It's taking so long. Is it still working? Is it loading? Is this thing happening? What's going on? Should I restart my browser? Like that shouldn't happen. You should know what's going on with the system. So it's a characteristic of what makes a good user experience. It's not everything, but it is a characteristic of that. The idea with all of this is to minimize a given task. I don't want to feel tired and exhausted and have a headache when I'm done with all this. I want to feel more, better. At least have that done. At least check it off my list of things to do. And so the benefits are increased usefulness, efficiency, and productivity. If we're all able to get a few more things done during the day, we're all going to feel a little better, which makes the world a better place. And we will make fewer errors. We will spend a lot less time in training, which is great. And we will really enjoy using whatever the product is, or at least recommend it to our friends. And we'll be able to say, yeah, those NPS scores, Net Promoter Scores, you've probably taken the little survey that pops up on a website or something, and 1 through 10, what did you think of the experience? The more 10s, the better the experience is. And being able to provide that type of experience where someone gladly is pressing the 10, that's a good thing as well. So I want to talk a little bit about IBM Design Thinking. Any questions before we move on? So IBM Design Thinking, this is not a new idea. Design thinking has been along for a very long time. We did not invent design thinking, but we have put our own ideas into it. And so the first, go ahead.
Yeah.
I could not tell you actually what the yellow does, other than it probably represents users. Yeah. Put your own cultural ideas into that.
Well, if you're creating contrast element in my time,
right, what does it
you need to be
mean?
able to understand it.
Yeah.
You have to feel.
Yeah, no, I honestly I could not tell you. Yeah. But I will ask now. Yeah, I will ask. Oh, yeah, there's more.
Human-centered outcomes at human scale.
Yes.
So that's human-centered. That yellowed out as you considered, and the outcomes at speed and scale are what the infinity loop is going around.
Yes. Yeah, I believe that you're right there, but I'm not sure.
I would still craft design, so that's how I would think of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it represents the users, not.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I think the yellow represents users, but, yes. If I say that though, I'll probably be wrong and someone else is. I think you're right. I do. I think it's the user. Yeah.
But somebody
But that's the color we use. Yeah, that's the color we use for this too. So I think you're right. But yeah, the core is that we understand people's needs, that we're really focused on the user, that we're trying to figure out what's the problem that we're trying to solve here. Let's find a solution that solves the problem, not let's take some technology and throw it at the problem, but rather let's find the right solution. So really understanding humans' needs. What is their intent? What are they trying to do? What is their goal with this process? Is it just to pay a bill? Is it to find something that's really interesting, to enjoy? What are they doing? What are they trying to do with this? And then for us to deliver outcomes at speed and scale, this is referring to Agile, of course. It's the ability to very quickly get some work done, get it out there, learn from it, and then make iterations as needed. So one of the ideas here is that everything is a prototype. Everything we put out is something that's meant to change further. It's meant to be adjusted based on what we learn and further improved. And so there are three aspects: principles, the loop, and the keys. I'll get to each of these. The principles first. Focus on the user outcome. So what are we going to... Yeah, I think it is user, but I don't want to... I don't know if there's actual meaning there or if somebody just picked yellow. That's why I'm hesitant.
Matches up with everything else. There's one, there's three.
It does fit this. I think it's that's rational. Yeah, so focusing on the users, that is key. That is a core piece of the whole idea, is getting that multidisciplinary team. So not just having designers doing stuff in their little box and then bringing that to development, throwing it over the wall. The idea is to have designers, developers, what we call offering managers or product owners working all together and working as a team. So small teams working together to solve problems at the same time. And restlessly reinventing. This is about the prototyping, treating everything as a learning experience. So you hear a lot of things I'm saying probably sound like Lean Startup if you've read that book. So the idea that you're able to create an experience, you do something, you learn from it, you iterate, and take that another step further. So the loop is this constant, the constant looping of observing, so seeing what people are doing, understanding their experiences, and taking that knowledge and using it, reflecting on what you've seen, and then making something from it quickly. So not spending months and months doing research and being stuck in that observation phase, not spending weeks and weeks and weeks reflecting on it. You don't want to overanalyze or oversynthesize. You want to make something. So it's a constant loop of getting right back to making something. And if you have a choice between doing observation and making, you go to making. And so this means making clinical prototypes, making functional software, whatever it is, doing that, getting some feedback on it, and then doing it.
Is that always make, or is it sometimes improve?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it can be improved. Yeah, so like on one of the teams I work on, we do prototypes, little prototypes for just small features, get some feedback on it, and then if it does well, then we implement that little thing. But it's really just an incremental improvement. It's not a whole new thing. Yeah, with more mature software, you're not going to be, or more mature websites or whatever, you're not going to be remaking the whole world. You're just going to be doing this incremental changes. Yeah. And then finally, the keys. We use hills, so this is a way of talking about goals or the things that you want to do. Epics is another way to think about them. And these are the things that we say that we're going to do, the value that we're going to be delivering at the end of a particular set of work. So this is what the goal is. Hill is the thing that we're climbing, so to speak. What are we going to make? A playback is a checkpoint. It's a way to communicate how we've done so far, what we've got at this point, and where we think we're going, and to get feedback from as many people as possible at that point. And then sponsored users are people who are partnering with us. So these aren't necessarily just companies, but also groups of individuals who have the same mental model. We're trying to solve the same problem, and we work with them very closely as much as we can to get their feedback from as many of them as possible, so that we're not just building for one customer or one person, but rather we're building for a group of people with the same shared needs. So that is design thinking. So again, the principles, the loop, the keys. There are lots of different flavors of design thinking. There's no wrong way, but the basic idea is that you understand your user, you put them first, and you try to build things that will help them the most, and do the right thing as much as you can, and do it quickly. Lots of iteration. Okay, move on. So why are they so much better? We need to focus on who those users are. Who are they? And the only way to do that is to actually get out there, to get out in the field and understand them. Who is actively going to use your product? How many of them are there? Who are they? Where are they? What do they do? Knowing the answers to that is really important, because designing for everyone is impossible. You're never going to make everyone happy. You're never going to make all your users happy. Even in a relatively small group, somebody will be annoyed with the product and your choices. So by narrowing down who you're really designing it for, it doesn't mean you break the experience for everybody else, but it means it's really the right thing for this particular type of user. For this person with this particular problem, this is the solution. I picked Basecamp. I wouldn't. But somebody else would say that. I would definitely use Basecamp over any other product management tool. This is the right tool for me. And you want that kind of response from the right set of users. Whereas the rest of the people, I can use Basecamp. It's literally not built for me, but I can get through it. It's not the worst product I've ever used. It's functional for me. And that's because they designed it clearly for one specific set of users. And that's why it's actually a usable product for me. So, and I'm not trying to pick Basecamp. The one that happens to be it. So again, who are your users? What are their goals? What are they trying to get done? What's the thing that they need to do while they're using your product? And what are some of the biggest issues, either with a product they're already using that's your competitor, or with the current process? Maybe there isn't even a solution yet. Maybe they're still using paper and Excel spreadsheets, something like that. What's the biggest problem with that process? And how might you be able to solve that? Getting to the root cause, the real problem that they have, will help you to develop a better solution. Instead of thinking, we've got such a great app, we just need to find the right users. Find a problem first. You're much more likely to be successful if you find a problem first. And think about the fact that individuals can have the same exact job title. So how many of you are developers? Is that on your title? Okay. And how many of you do you think actually do the same thing? Now, we are in the C#.net. I realize that you guys probably do overlap some, but realistically, your jobs are probably very different. You're working in different organizations. Some of you work in really large corporations. Some of you work in very small corporations. Some of you may be on your own. Some of you may work for startups. You're all actually very different, and your problems are going to be very different. And so focusing on your job title alone isn't really going to give you enough information to move forward. You need to know more about what their needs are, motivations, expectations, all of that. Thinking about students, for example, since we're at DePaul, if I named a student, everyone in this room may think of someone else. They may think of themselves. They may think of their children. They may think of their parents. They may think of their cousin. They may think of a neighbor. We can all think about a student and be thinking about completely different people. And that's a big problem, because if you are very unclear, if you're very vague about who you're designing for and you just say student, if everyone's thinking about somebody else, you're going to have a mishmash product. It's not going to actually be a coherent, consistent experience for your user, because the people who are building that piece of the app are thinking about the young woman, Connie, and the other people are thinking about the older gentleman going back to school, and they prioritize very different things. And now you've just got this inconsistent product. And so it's really important that everybody knows really who are you talking about, what are their priorities, what are their needs. It sounds wishy-washy, but it's actually really important to be focused and clear on who you're designing for. So you want to start with some quick assumptions. Nobody knows all the answers right away, but what's your guess? If you have a product owner or a project manager or somebody leading the project, force them to do a little bit of the heavy thinking as far as who they want this product to be for. Who is it that you think is going to buy this? And then the people who can go out and talk to people can figure out if they're right or not. But you start with those assumptions. Who do we think we're talking about? We can talk about these as archetypes. We think that this individual is a 32-year-old returning to school, wants to get a master's degree, they're thinking that they want an MBA. That's who we're focusing on. And, think about what differentiates them, what you know about them, and then go talk to a bunch of 32-year-old people going back to get their MBA and see if they have anything in common, see what kind of problems they're trying to solve, what's going on with them. And once you have a lot of research, you can actually turn these into what are called personas. And I'm not going to get too much into that, but the idea is that you have a really strong idea of who you're designing for, and that everybody in the organization can talk about this individual pretty coherently, and that everybody's got a pretty good idea of who you're building for. And then you'll get a good product, or at least a consistent one out of that. You can talk to customer service people, marketing people, all kinds of people who know about that group before you even go out, and get a little bit more information, a sketch, a better sketch of who this individual is. And you want to make sure that you're always including people with disabilities. Yeah.
So my question.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into questions too many, but
Yeah.
typically when you develop that,
Yeah.
do you ever use the people who you use for developing the personas that are testing the product afterward, or?
Yeah. So ideally, yes. So I think I understood your question anyway. So if you have the luck of being able to do some research and you've talked to people and you've got a really well-formed persona, you feel like you know who your user is, ideally you use that to help you recruit people to later do usability testing with.
Right,
Yeah.
I was going to say, if you can, let's say, something who have, like, you understand.
Yeah, yeah.
And then say, okay, this is going to match with.
Yeah, exactly. And then you know, either it's going to work or it's not, and you get some good feedback. Ideally, I try not to use the same people over and over again, because then I end up with a weird bias towards this 5 people or whatever it is. But it is great when you have that kind of validation to see, did I hear you correctly? Is this actually something that's going to work for you? That's really nice. Yeah. So people with disabilities, we are all only temporarily able-bodied. Those of us with glasses, when we take them off, we're no longer as able-bodied. Those of us who play sports and get hurt for a little while, we're limping around using a crutch. We aren't disabled or handicapped. We just, things aren't working the way they used to, or things aren't working the way they did yesterday anyway, and we hope that they get back to the way they were in a few weeks. So it's a condition that can impede our daily tasks, and these can be a variety of different things. And what we want to do is build for accessibility. We want to build so that everybody is able to complete a task in a way that is reasonable, efficient, effective, all the ideas I was talking about earlier, and regardless of their ability or their environment. So again, if the internet is cut off, if whatever happens, they're still able to get something done. And the idea is also useful for everyone. So if you think about curb cuts, they're great for people who happen to be using a wheelchair, but they're also really great if you happen to be pushing a stroller or carrying your luggage or anything else with wheels. Or if your muscle is strained from your soccer game. It's very nice not to pick it up and go above onto a big curb. So these are helpful for everybody. Same with the more accessible packaging on pills. It's very nice for everybody, including people with disabilities, with arthritis or something. So these things help everybody. And disabilities vary. I've talked about this a little bit. Onset can change, the course of the disability, so sometimes things are just getting worse. So with macular degeneration, your eyes, everything gets a little darker. They can be temporary and permanent. And these types of disabilities can differ in their degree of severity as well. And some things are more severe than others. Diabetes is an example where you can lose tactile sense. So, again, moving around has become very difficult. Typing can even be more frustrating. And it's important to just think about these things, that we're not all healthy 20-year-olds. Yes?
It's not even just about your own body. It's taking the fact that there are mental disabilities. We all have this quiet room, but we have a noise room, and I can hear you.
Exactly. Yep. Yes.
Sorry.
It's a great point.
We just talked about that. You can't see your fingers.
Right.
It's in the winter. I can't
Yeah.
because I have thick gloves on.
Yep. And I have Raynaud's, so it's this weird thing where my fingers just get numb sometimes. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Gloves, loud manufacturing facilities where you can't hear a thing. If somebody puts a nice little ding in the app to warn you that something's happening and you're in the loud manufacturing facility, you're never going to hear that. It's never going to get your attention. And that light, if you're blind, it can blink all day. You're never going to notice it because there's no auditory information being delivered to you. So that's why in a lot of buildings now, when there's a fire alarm, it's the blinking and the noise. And, everybody should be aware something's going on and it's bad. And that's really important. But we all can, we can have a bad signal on our phone. That happens, in almost any building these days. You could be in a situation where you just have slow internet, or you have a very tiny screen, and you really need to see that piece of information. But darn it, they will not let you, zoom in. How annoying is that? It happens every day. I just want to be able to see it a little closer. So we all have some sort of limiting conditions where we are not actually disabled ourselves or physically handicapped, but we are having issues. So we really want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. Make your products flexible, make them perceivable regardless of the situation, so that people can navigate, interact, contributing is one of the key things. So they can add to it. So if you're creating something where you want people to be able to add content, so if you're doing social media, if you're doing a wiki, if you're doing any type of even an agile tracking, GitHub, something like that, if people can't contribute due to some sort of environmental issue, then you're missing out on half of the whole interaction. So you think about these things if you're work. Because the biggest waste of all is building something that no one wants. And you will quickly, unfortunately, go out of business as well, which isn't helpful to anyone. So as you're doing all this research, you're gathering all this information, you want to be able to transform it to be able to find patterns. But you don't want to spend a huge amount of time doing it. And there's a balance there. So you don't want to do huge studies. You don't want to talk to 500 people. You want to talk to a small set of carefully recruited people if you can, or at least people who do similar things. Get as much information as you can out of them, and then move forward. And do this as quickly as you can. Figure out what you've got. Organize it as best you can. Throw it up on a wall. Have somebody else look at it as well. Figure out what your patterns are and move on. And you can do it repeatedly. And that's the idea. Just get your work moving as quickly as you can. Keep digging if you don't have enough answers. There's always room for more questions and more interviews. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you mean about looking for patterns.
Oh, okay.
What the context is.
Yeah, so the patterns would be, so I've talked to, for example, 5 people in a manufacturing facility who all work on the same machine. And each of them talked about the frustration with a particular lever. And so I see a pattern between the 5. They talk about it differently, maybe one of them didn't mention it, but 4 of them mentioned it, but there's a bit of a pattern there that they're talking about the same things. Or they're referring to the same problem, something along those lines. Okay, yeah. And ideally you want to talk to enough people that you see a pattern. If everything's all over the place, either you're talking to too many people who are too different from each other, or there's a lot of problems, and you need to prioritize what you're going to deal with first.
An example with the lever, that lever was built specific for that person. You're the perfect user for it.
Maybe, right.
Oh, the one that didn't say anything.
Right, that's it, exactly. And
Yeah,
maybe,
but when you're only satisfying 20% of your user base.
right. And it's priorities, though. If that person pulls it 50 times a day and the other people pull it twice, so you got to figure out really what's important, though. I mean, to both of your points, is it the frequency because this person is doing this so frequently and it works for them, it's fine, or is it this person only does it once or twice a day, but when they do it, boy, it's got to work. It's the emergency stop pull. And anybody, regardless, somebody as short as me has got to be able to have enough pressure to pull that, or somebody's going to die. So thinking about the what's really important in the works is part of that. All right. So some experiences are still better. Why? So part of this is just our ability to get things going, to learn something, to iterate on it, to improve it, to make it even better. And one way to think about this, it's called experience-driven agile, is to develop up to an experience, not thinking down to a feature. So instead of thinking, we want to build X, Y, Z, thinking, what kind of experience do we want these people to have? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is the job to be done? That's another framework that people use. What is it that we're really doing here? Not, look, we've got cool technology, let's throw it at something. So we want to, again, create a great, usable, accessible product, right? Something that's really relevant to people's experiences. And something that they're going to rely on and use hopefully more than once, unless they really only need these ones. So these are some true statements that may ring a little too true to some of you. All interfaces have usability problems. They all do. If you ever witness a usability study and like no problems found, there was probably something wrong with the way the study was developed. There's always more to fix. No interface is perfect. It's really almost impossible, just like us, humans. No one is perfect, and no interface that we create is perfect. We all have limited resources to be able to fix those problems, and there are more problems than resources. This will be a constant. I'm sure it is in all of your lives. And the less problems will only distract you from what you really need to be focusing on. So try to avoid getting distracted by little tiny things. If you can fix it, great, but don't spend a lot of time fixing something little if you've got bigger problems. Focus on the big problems first. And really that's the key is that intense focus on fixing things that are really going to improve the product experience overall. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a way to get design integrated into your systems. How many of you actually work with designers or are designers of some sort? Research, interaction design, graphic design? Yep. Okay, 3 of you? Oh, so about 4 people. Okay, so designers don't have to be off in their own world. They can be working right beside development. Do any of you actually work on integrated teams? 1 person. It's hard. I'm not going to say this is easy, but this is one way of doing it. And the idea is that you actually think about the different types of work. So there's a developer track. That's the work. And I'm talking from an Agile perspective. Is anybody not at all working in Agile? Okay. Okay. For the most part, it sounds like you're at least vaguely familiar. Maybe doing an Agile call thing, something going on. Okay. So the focus for the developer track is on production. It's on making something that's functional. It's making a potentially shippable increment of something. So it works, it does something, it solves some sort of problem ideally. And the whole team, including UX, is working in the developer track. So for my teams, typically it's an interaction designer, so somebody who's doing maybe some wireframing and trying to really solve a problem with a digital solution. And then a more of a graphic designer, visual designer, who actually usually pairs very closely with the developer to get that final piece in. So she has ideas about what to do with the visual design, and we also have the style guide I mentioned, the carbon design, so she's working to help that developer get all that into the actual working product. So they're working very closely together. And that's on making a functional product. Yeah?
I'm a recent graduate. I'm struggling with, is it expected within the business industry that the graphic designer is the developer?
It depends. Sometimes. Yeah, so there's a lot of, I won't get too off track with this, but
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So there's this concept of the unicorn. Anyone heard of a unicorn? These mythical creatures, they're amazing. Zipcar actually has a really cool car with unicorns on it. I just saw it the other day. It's pretty cool. They don't exist in my world. There are very few unicorns on the planet. There are probably a few. They have not come into my yard recently. So I can't confirm their existence, but can't quite deny them either. But the idea that someone can have a skill set that ranges from a researcher, someone who's really good at talking to people, loves interacting with them, wants to watch them, really understand them, and also loves to code and get super deep in there and find that little thing that's wrong. These people can exist, but those 2 people are not going to be really good at both of those jobs.
I'm just looking for positions that when I search graphic design, I'm looking for a web developer.
Yeah, a lot of times, and sometimes it's something wrong with the title. So they think a title is going to attract more people, and so they have a title that sounds really swanky, and the actual work is really development. Or they're looking for the whole package, which they can look as long as they want. They're going to get somebody who's a developer who likes visual design, which is great. Or they're going to get a designer who can't really code. Or they're going to get somebody who's okay at both. But and they're looking the same way. Of course they are. Right. But most humans are relatively T-shaped. We can lie to ourselves. But most of us are T-shaped. We're really good at something. We may not like doing that thing, but we're really good at it. And then there's a bunch of stuff that we like to do, or we're interested in, or we really are pretty decent at. And some people's T is shorter than others. Some people are super, academically deep in something, and some people are a little bit more shallow. But for the most part, I believe that most people have a home base where they're it feeds them, they feel energized, they get energy from doing that activity. And then some things they can do but are a little bit less exciting or interesting or engaging, and then figuring out where your balance is, of course. But yes, a lot of jobs out there are looking for people who can do everything and be paid $25,000 a year. Great. Yeah, well, and if you really want a unicorn, unicorns are rare. They're really expensive. And luckily the job market is good, so yeah, remind them of that. So on the UX track, the interaction designers track. So again, this is everybody working together, doing dev, getting it done quickly. Usually in Agile, it's 2 to 3 weeks of work at a time. So these are small increments of getting stuff done, very, very short. So in this amount of time, they're building stuff very, very quickly. In the meantime, down here, there's a UX track. And this is where the interaction design is happening. And also the user contact. So this is where we're doing research, we're doing earlier work, just kind of problem solving, thinking about problems more deeply. And that's because if we did that here, we would slow this group down. So they're working at the same time and in the same period of time. So in a 2 to 3 week period of time, I'm going to get some research work done. I'm going to maybe run a usability study. I'm going to build a prototype for my next usability study. I'm going to do something very short and quick in that period of time that's not going to slow down the dev team, but it's going to inform, as you'll see, their next work. So we split off. So on the top of the development team, the designers are working really hard to help them get product out the door. And in the meantime, we're trying to get some information from our customers. Interviews, doing some observations, going out and talking to people, bringing back information, trying to analyze that as quickly as we possibly can. And then that information informs that next sprint, that next set of work, whatever that next set is. So that we're creating a little bit earlier funnel of doing some early work, figuring out some problems so that when the dev team is ready to go on it, we've got the solution, we've got the idea for them to start working on it. That doesn't mean we don't have to go back and iterate, because I guarantee in many situations your idea, for whatever reason, even if you brought in dev to consult on it, once they start coding, something's wrong. It doesn't work, we can't get that to do it, something's wrong in the back end, these actually don't tie together, something's always amiss, and that's fine. Part of development. That's part of the work. And then sometimes you do have to take it back down and do some more work on it. And sometimes you just plow through. You figure out what's going to work, make it work, and move on. And so the cycle continues to go, and you continue to learn from your users as much as possible, while at the same time dev is just continuing to go. And this work, testing, is happening. It can be testing functional code from here. So you could be doing usability testing on something that was developed in the previous sprint. You could be testing a prototype that you developed based on the research here. You could be doing all that type of activity again, and not slowing down dev, keeping things moving as quickly as possible. And keep going, testing. And that was by Desiree Side. She's written an article on it. She does a lot of presentation on it. She's really great. And then this is a reality check as well, because we're talking about 2 different types of work. There's the development work and the discovery work, and we need to do the discovery work very quickly in order to really get that value from it. And this is Jeff Patton's work. He does a lot of work on agile work and design and things like that. And he does a very similar idea. He built on Desiree's idea. In his drawing, you can see little trash cans, and I love this. And some of the ideas, some of the work, he flipped the order, which I wish he hadn't, but he did. He put the interaction design work on top and the dev work on the bottom. But you can see some of the interaction design ideas end up in the trash can. And that's fine. That means you're learning, you're growing, you're changing, you're figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and iterating and continuing, and releasing, measuring, and learning. So again, just that the idea is to continuously be working towards getting things better and improving and having value for your users. And I didn't say, it's not dual track, you're not building. It's dual track, you're working together. It's a nice spin on. He wrote a nice blog. If you Google that, you'll find this blog from me. It's a nice touch.
Hey, Carol?
Yes.
So going back to that last slide with the release, measure, and learn, To what extent do you go as far as measuring? I mean, I've heard of UX designers that have retina scanners and monitor how long it takes for someone to find a button or a specific item on a screen, versus others who just use a stopwatch. What's the extent of that?
So it depends. There are eye tracking software that you're mentioning that really can track. It's very helpful in certain circumstances, in my opinion. It works very well for determining where people are going on the page, especially if you've got a problem and you can't figure out what's wrong with it, with the site or with the app or something like that, where people aren't moving. What's going on? Nobody's getting to where we want them to go. Eye tracking can help you answer that question. It may not provide all your answers, but it can help you see what's drawing their eyes. Oh, it's the way we use those design principles, and now their eyes are all going to the wrong place. Everybody's looking in the wrong corner because for whatever reason, the graphic design has led them down there, and nobody's looking in the upper right where we want them to look. So you can learn a lot by following those patterns, and they're really cool charts. It's a very geeky tool because you actually can see where people's eyes are going on the page, and so you can see hot spots and pretty cool technology. But it's got somewhat limited use because you don't know necessarily why unless you're talking to them while they're going to study. You don't know why they're looking at it. You don't know if they're just looking at it, if they have a lazy eye. You don't know what's going on necessarily with their actual interaction. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. Stopwatch, I don't tend to do time studies. A lot of people do, but you really have to have functioning software. And I'm not a big fan of what's called summative testing or testing with a stopwatch because usually that's at the end of the process. And if I'm doing it at the end, I'm not really helping to inform the design. I want to be making changes on the software. I don't actually care how it's going right now. I want to know what I can do next. So unless there's work planned to be done on that, and we need to improve the time, perhaps, then maybe we do need to decrease the amount of time it's taking people, then I might time it, if I know that the work is going to be addressed. But if it's just doing it because somebody wants to know how long it takes, I'm not a big fan of reports on desks or reports on shelves. In fact, I don't have my team do reports typically. We might put a PowerPoint together, but it's very short, very brief, very obviously came right out of the work, not pages and pages of documentation on what happened. But the measurability I do believe strongly in is web metrics and instrumentation on applications and things like that, where you can actually see where are people going, where are they dropping off. You still don't know why. You still have to do additional work to figure out why they're doing that, but at least you know everybody stops on this page. We don't know if it's because they all found what they wanted and that's great and then they left, or if they all got lost and they weren't sure what to do next and they left and they went to our competitor. Crap. But you at least know they stopped there, which gives you a point of reference. It's a point to start doing more work and to figure out what's going on there. So I'm a big fan of that kind of measurement. And a lot of that you can do very easily now. Google has a lot of great tools that you can put on if you've got a web-enabled software, and there are lots of other vendors that have lots of great tools. So I definitely recommend that. And then use that to inform your research and vice versa. See if you improved. Are things getting better? That Net Promoter Score I mentioned, if we had a number and we wanted to increase it by 2 points, did we do that? Were we able to increase our Net Promoter Score because of those usability changes we made? You can do those types of measurements. Now you're talking about money, which is great because then you can fund your department, which is wonderful. So constant communication. When you've got these two tracks going, it's not like they're off in their own planets. They have to be communicating. They have to be learning from each other. They have to be working together. And one idea is that the people actually alternate the work. So the designer that was working on the dev stuff that's now going to be tested goes with the stuff to be tested. It does that work, and the other people come up to work with dev, so that everybody really is integrated and knows what's going on. So you don't want walls in this type of work. You want everybody working together as much as possible. And it's all at once. It's not two tracks and two separate teams. It's everybody, again, working together and getting the teams to be aware and involved in the other work. So there are lots of cons to this. So you can end up with big design up front, BDUF, which is where, look, I've created this incredible interaction. Go build it. That's horrible. It's not going to end up looking anything like that, number one. But number two, nobody wants to be handed a bunch of specs. That's not interesting and fun anyway. That's not a good way to communicate. So you don't want that. That's waterfall. Unless you have to. There are industries where that makes sense and you need to, and I'm not saying that you should not do that. But for the most part, it's not the idea. And it's not a solo sport. You have to have a team to be able to do this. One person cannot support dev and be doing research at the same time, which is not going to work. So you do have to have a larger, more mature design. If you have a question, yeah. Big design up front. Yeah. Sorry, big design up front. It's the idea that you design the entire website with Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign or pick your poison. And it's beautiful, pixel perfect, and then you hand it to the development team to build it.
And of course, that's a static picture. It doesn't talk about anything of the interaction.
Exactly. Yep. Huge problems with that. And it's definitely not going to look like that when the development team is done, regardless of anything. Plus, it probably doesn't work.
Plus, there's multiple browsers that display things differently.
Yeah, and well, nothing ever looks pixel perfect,
right?
Regardless if it's on a computer screen. But that's a whole different. Yeah. But the pros is that you have space for this discovery work. You actually can get this work done. You're not slowing anybody down. It's still moving along nicely, and you're able to inform the work with the user's feedback. So it's a constant balancing act. Yeah.
Do you typically ask the designer to start to mock up first, or do you ask the developer to have basic layout of what they're looking for?
Yeah, so
and then give that to the designer, or
yeah, no, it's always the designers trying to solve it first. So first you identify a problem, and then interaction designers usually are working on some ideas, and then getting feedback from development as early as possible. So they're not designing in a box without development. So development will have one of our people, Dave or whoever it is, they come in and they look and they're like, oh, can't do that, or this would actually work better if we did it this way, or we have this other pattern we should apply here. Whatever it is, they have that conversation, while ideally it's either on paper or very roughly laid out on the screen, but without any working code. The idea is to reduce the amount of code that's wasted as much as possible. So starting with very early paper sketches if possible, PowerPoint. There are lots of great tools, Sketch and Balsamic and things like that are really just a few pixels on a page and not pretty, just use really ugly Comic Sans font, and that's great. But does this work? Have that conversation, and then if it does work, see, I heard her ears. Did you see that? I actually heard her.
I'd like to pick up back on the question there.
Yeah.
When you go back, or when you do your initial research on your different personas, if you will, are you asking them for their thoughts on how the presentation or the interaction is supposed to work?
Sometimes, yeah. So I'll ask them their expectations for it. I'll ask them about, usually I try to go more with what they are currently doing and how they're currently doing the work, because they're much more able to talk about their past experiences. Humans have a really hard time figuring out the future. It's just not something we're good at. So I try to get them to really talk about the past experience. What did you do when this problem came up last time? How did you solve this? How are you currently going through this? Can you show me an example of how you currently do this? Those are more the conversations I try to focus on. And part of that's because they just don't understand necessarily the technology I'm working with and the constraints I'm working with. But they also may just want unicorns, and butterflies, and things that we can't do from that end either. So I try to get them to talk about their process, and then I interpret that into a digital experience. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but how do you make the leap from, okay, this is what you did in the past, how do you, what do you apply to, this is how I'm going to model it for the future?
Right, and that's the hard part. That's where you need somebody who's familiar with the interactions that are available and how you can piece together the best practices into an experience that is usable. And then you bring it back to the users. I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but you bring it back to the users as quickly as possible. We talked about a little bit ago, and get their feedback. And does this work? And they'll say, I've never used this. This is horrible. Or it kind of works. But the important thing is it's really rough still, so they don't think you're done. So that it's really ugly. It's still using Comic Sans. It's still really rough looking, and they can critique it and feel that you haven't put too much work into it. The problem with showing them something that looks really good is that they'll think, he spent so much time on this. I don't want to tell him, you know. He's such a nice guy. He came all the way back here again. It's fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. But it won't be fine. You need to show them really early rough stuff so that they can tear it apart, give you their feedback. Usually I lie and I don't tell them I did it. I tell them some dude on the project came up with this idea. What do you think? Even if I did it, I lie at that point. I only tell 2 lies. That's one of them. Yeah.
I have clients that disagree with them.
Okay.
Totally.
Why?
Because when I try to do the you present something, and you go through iterations, you have the I like to say I come from an automation.
Mm-hmm.
You bend and you bring the operators in. You do this. You do this iteration. It doesn't work. It doesn't work until they actually are on the plant floor. Yes. They actually see it working.
Yes.
And then they click in.
And
then they see what's happening.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you on that point. So the biggest problem with this is testing, for example, with a paper prototype for a digital experience doesn't work really well. There's been books written about paper prototyping. I believe strongly you should start with paper and pencil, but you should move quickly to something clickable if it's digital. If it's physical, you need to make a physical prototype as quick as possible. You need to create a model. You need to get that model out on the floor and have them test with it. But don't put the machinery in the back of it if you can help it. Make it a model that just has enough tension to give them the idea of the switch. It's cardboard and it's styrofoam and it doesn't actually work, but you can get an idea of it. Does this flow work? Is this in the right order? Is this the right label? That sort of thing. And then if that label doesn't work, you rip off that Post-it note and you put on a different Post-it note.
Yeah, but
you do it that way.
But when you actually put a user interface out, my first experience was hopefully here at LTV when we put the user interfaces in the pulpits.
Uh-huh.
So they see in the pulpits. This is where they work. They have steel mill out there. There has to be pulpits where the users work because it is all automated. They don't have anybody touching the product. So it's all computerized. So the point is that even if you're sitting here and it's like here, they don't in their minds. They don't see that until they actually see the product moving and hear the machinery moving.
Yeah, and that is a tough problem. I agree. But if you spend all that time building them that's wrong, that's worse. So you got to figure out a way to make it cheap and easy for you to find out what you need to know without spending $1 million on a new piece of machinery and wasting all that time and energy. So it's tough. I'm not saying I have an easy answer, but defer to prototypes as much as possible where you can.
So you're starting with paper prototypes and moving to a prototyping tool or asking your developers to mock something?
Ideally not having the developers mock something up unless they're super fast and they really like doing it. Some of our people do. On my team, I honestly have had people throw together a prototype very quickly because they really want to. But usually we're using, like I mentioned, Balsamic. We use Axure a lot, which is Axure, A-X-U-R-E. I prefer it. A lot of my team prefer Sketch, which is another tool. That they're two different schools of camp depending on if you're more of a visual graphic person or if you're more of a light code person and then where your home is. And the Balsamic is super easy. It's free. And it's online, but it's only online, so you can't actually use it behind firewalls and things like that. So it gets a little tricky sometimes.
What was the name of that?
It's balsamic, like the vinegar, but with a Q at the end, if I'm spelling it right. I think it's got the Q at the end. So there's lots and lots of prototyping tools. I'm happy to tell you more about those afterwards. But get into one of those clickable prototypes. Build something really ugly that works, that's got a flow, that actually mimics what you're trying to build, and then have somebody else use it. Tell them to pay the bill and watch and see what they do. Yeah?
Another vote here for Balsamic.
Okay, great.
Very good tool.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very easy to use, and you can make an entire whatever you're building, a website, a product, whatever it is, in minutes. Maybe hours at the most, but you'll build the entire thing without any back end at all. And that's what you want to do. You don't want to worry about databases and hooking it up to any technology or anything like that. You just need to know about the interaction to get that right. If you don't have a front end then you don't need to worry about this. It's, you know.
How would that compare to something like Illustrator?
So some people prefer to use Illustrator for that type of thing. Illustrator for me is a nightmare. I may be a designer, but I'm not a visual designer, and I don't get into, they're called vectors, and you could probably give us a lesson on this. Yeah, it's not my world. So if you're good with that tool, yeah, not my world.
It was really tough.
Yeah.
Really tough to learn Illustrator.
Yeah. They're really hard tools to learn for some people. For some people, they are quite at home with them. But my T is over in research. Yeah, your T is over in visual design.
But that's more of a static.
What? Usually it's not. Yeah, Illustrator is usually not used for clickable things.
Right.
But you can make it clickable because
it's Illustrator is implementable into InDesign, and
Yes.
InDesign is implementable to the clickable links.
Yeah. There are lots
Like you
of
can plug in
Adobe
some
products.
HTML links, or not HTML, but URLs. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. But all these tools can work together within Adobe. If you're in the Adobe suite, they all work together fairly well. But there's a range between really complex and relatively simple, and quick start and spending hours. The danger with Illustrator and Photoshop and tools like that is that you do get the pixel perfect stuff, and you don't want to be there. You don't want to play with that at this level. You want to just get, fast and dirty. PowerPoint, honestly, is the one I would recommend you start with, because it's easy to draw a box and you link it to the next page or the third page or whatever it is, and create a clickable prototype really easily. Yeah.
I always found that those A was well sounded to be interesting about that very point.
Yeah.
Because they make the point that their fonts are not Comic Sans.
Yes.
But they're not Times Roman either. They look like scribbles.
Yeah, they're scribbles, which is what you want. Yeah.
They make it very clear that they chose such a font for their product because they wanted to emphasize that this is an unfinished, informal item ready to be discussed. It's not something that's been shipped in stone and it cannot be changed.
Yeah.
I found that a very refreshing attitude from the people that put the product together.
But it's functional.
Very functional.
It clicks,
do screen flow.
Oh yeah,
Screen
everything.
flow, logic. Yeah.
Yep.
So you click in buttons?
Oh yeah, the whole deal. The whole deal with all the tools. Yeah.
You whip up the screen and then you say, well, here's a button. Oh, by the way, that button's good for going over here.
Yep. And you just link it all. Now with Axure, the other one I mentioned, you can actually even create fake drop downs, and you can create fake little databases. So you can put in like 4 pieces of data. So if you really need to see how people interact with data, you can actually you can bring in like a little Excel spreadsheet, make it a little bit more interactive in that way if you're really working with more complex. Usually that's more for business apps, not for consumers. Almost all of them will have like a state drop down and stuff like that in forms. Like that's pretty standard across all the products. So you can build really functioning software, faked, completely faked, but it looks like it could work. And that's all you need. You just need the appearance. You do not need all that back end again feedback.
Is that sort of the tools that you use after you do your interviews with your...
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes I'll show them I might do an interview, and then I might have some ideas that we're working on, and so I'll give them control of the computer. I'll either literally slide my computer over, or if it's remote, I'll give them control of the screen, and have them try to do some tasks using whatever prototype we're working on right then. And see.
And that's where you get your feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if they're able to do it, yay! And if they have a lot of questions, if they're confused, if I don't know what I would do next, that's a problem. I need to figure that out. And once in a while, it's because they aren't necessarily the right person, and that's also important for you to realize too. Sometimes you recruit somebody for a study, and you find out, oh, we had our focus way off. It's not actually people with this job title or something like that, because they weren't even familiar with the terminology we were using, or you were using the wrong terminology. And you have to figure out, is it the terminology, is it the people, what needs to give, and figure out your focus. But you're only going to find this out if you leave your office, or at least remotely talk to other people. If you only talk to the people in your office, you'll never find out what the people outside your office are like. And if you've only worked for one company, you wouldn't know this necessarily, but their companies are really different. You get stuck in that culture, and then you can't see the rest of the world out there. And there's a lot of it.
That's why you have to keep up.
That's it. That's my rationale. But you do learn a lot with the job. But you learn a lot in the same company, because usually you don't have the same job for 2 or 3 years anyway in the same company. So the change is constant. That is for sure. So again, it's a balancing act. So you need to meet production needs. You have to ship something. You have to pay your bills. You have to get something out there. But you also need to make something that really is usable and useful so that people keep using it and keep paying your bills. So you just got to figure this out. You want to stay as lean as you can and time box everything. Force yourself to do things very quickly. Force your team to do things very quickly. Don't let things languish and go on and on and on. It doesn't do anybody any good. Yes.
You mentioned on the previous screen Agile. You asked before, but I don't know what you mean by what Agile is.
Okay, great. Yeah. Let me quickly go back because it is an important idea. So this doesn't really show you, but Agile is basically the idea of time boxing your work, or at least grouping your work into very small pieces. So
what, is that just a concept that somebody came up with?
It's not mine. No, it's a development process. Have you heard of waterfall?
No.
Okay. So in software development, there are 2 different flavors mainly. There's waterfall, where I'm going to spend 6 months speccing this out. I'm going to come up with a 300-page document describing every single button to the painful detail, everything about this, and then the development team's going to start working on it.
Oh, so now I know why you got the word Agile.
Yes.
Don't do the old.
Don't do the old way, which is the way most companies did it until about 10, 15 years
So
ago.
it's the design, strategy, concept that's developed.
Yeah. It's basically making sure that you're not planning so far ahead of yourself, and that you're responding to change as you need to, and that you're not, if you spend the reason why these $1 billion software projects failed was because they were $1 billion software projects. That's stupid. Like, what are you doing with all that money? Let's make it smaller. Let's make mistakes earlier. Let's fail early. That whole idea. Fail really quickly, and if it fails, at least you didn't spend $1 billion on a bad piece of software. Sure. Usability testing. I've been talking about this a lot, actually, which is wonderful. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about literally watching this human being use your stuff. This is not the dog and pony show. This is not user acceptance testing, which is a dog and pony show. This is not showing them how to do it. This is saying, hey, I built this, or I didn't build it, some other person built this, billing app. I want you to try to pay this bill using this. And then you give them the bill if you need to by hand, because you're not going to want them checking their email on your computer. And they look at it and they say, okay, I got to pay, the car rental company. All right. And they go in and they start trying to use it. And they hopefully will find some mistakes for you that you can then fix. They will probably find a lot. And watching them for the first time can be jaw-dropping. Have any of you participated or watched the usability study? It is. It should be. It's lovely. Oh, it's lovely. Because they will, you'll just watch them suffer through this. You're like, it's right there. But don't you say that. You never say that. But you will want to, because you designed it. Yeah.
Watch this. Is that the balsamic phase, or is this something after that?
This is balsamic. This is as early as you possibly can get it out. So when it's painfully ugly, dirty, and you know it's not right, or it's not quite right, but it should be reasonable. It shouldn't be literally a napkin scratch. It should be something that you think is reasonable to test with a human. So you don't want to abuse these poor people.
With the database?
Doesn't have, no, not at all.
Unless it's a live.
You fake it. Fake everything. Because that way you're going to know right away, oh, we need an extra field. Or, oh, crap, the database isn't formatted correctly, or whatever it is. You're going to better understand what their mental model is, because they'll say, hey, Jane, I don't see what I'm looking for here. I need this biller's address. Where do I put the address? Oops, we forgot that field. That's how you find out, is when this person is saying, I can't figure this out. I don't know what you're talking about. What do I do next? Where's the thing? That's the conversation you want to have. And you want to have it before you've done any of that real work. You want to have it when it's still balsamic. It's still ugly, and it's still your baby. You'll be surprised how attached you are to that thing when they say it sucks. But your baby will be ugly the first time, and it's okay. You still love them.
it could be on a live product as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely. I'm just
that's
encouraging early testing,
Right.
but definitely.
That's where
Yeah.
where my experience was.
Yeah.
That's where where I found out what the product was missing completely.
Awesome. And that's good. This is a good result from usability
If the
study.
company would have fixed it.
That's a whole different, yeah. but you want to find that aha moment. That's lovely. Yeah.
So what were the two building pony shows?
Oh, so a dog and pony show, I'm sorry.
I
yeah.
get that.
Okay.
What were the two?
Yeah, so one of them is user acceptance testing. It's actually an Agile. So in Agile, there are a lot of what you call ceremonies or activities that occur. One of them is called user acceptance testing. And the idea of it is that you show, like I click on something I made and show you that I made it because you told me exactly what to make. So it's usually a situation where I'm a consultant and you're my customer, and now I'm showing you, look, I did the things you told me to do. Isn't that great? And you hopefully say yes, but it's not the same thing. You're not actually testing the usability of it. And the other, I don't remember what I probably meant, but probably just showing something on, like this, showing a audience the product. Like, this is all the features. Like more of a marketing or a sales presentation. That's also not going to give you your problems, because who's going to raise their hand in an audience like this and say there's something really wrong? And you, all right, that guy. You better hope he's in your audience, but otherwise most people aren't going to do that. And more importantly, most people can't actually cognitively put themselves in the right mindset in a presentation. Like, it's just not. You need to give them a real scenario that they're actually going through for them to, like, if you put fake data in the prototype, it's one thing to have fake data, it's another thing to have nonsensical data. You're not going to get a whole lot of meaning if you're not using real information. So having them solve them, not like, then I'd like you to click the button. No, I need you to solve this particular problem for yourself, pay this bill, and then see if they can figure it out, and have information in there that would actually allow them to pay a bill. Does that make sense? All right.
Do you have any hints on where you get people to do testing for you?
It depends. Yeah, don't use your Anthony article usually. So people in this room, I'm betting most of you get boxes on your front step every couple days that say Amazon. Anybody, does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
The majority of Americans don't. So don't get boxes that say Amazon on their front step.
What's wrong with that?
That is an excellent question, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I know, it's shocking. But the point is that we are already beyond the typical user for the most part. Now, if you're developing for developers, if you're developing for UX people, if you're developing for high-tech people, that's a different story. But most of us are developing for average humans. And average humans are not highly technical people. So your friends and family, unless they rely heavily on you for your technical support, which you probably have some of that, they're not the right people. You want to recruit people you don't know. So Walmart, coffee shops, you can go on Craigslist. You can use a recruiter. Recruiters are an excellent way to find the right people. So you give a recruiter the list of the type of person you're looking for, and then they go recruit for you.
So if you were at Walmart, you just walk up to people and say, hey, now, would you like to do this?
I would only do that if you're actually doing something in an e-commerce or a commerce type situation. So otherwise, I would put a piece of paper on the wall that says, participate in this study. You see these things all the time, right? Participate in the study, $100, $50. Yeah. You can also use your user groups if you have a user group. If you were a C#.net type person, you would talk to these people. You'd buy them pizza and say, hey, would you like to participate in my study? And whatever product you're working on, there may be a group of people who use it naturally. So you can go to their conferences, you can recruit them through mailing lists, things like that. So be creative. Think about where are these people usually at. If you are creating something for regular consumers, I have gone to coffee shops and intercepted people and said, hey, can I buy you that cup of coffee if you sit with me for 10 minutes? And it's not a great study, but it's some feedback. It's a little bit of feedback. I did a lot of work for Cleveland Clinic, and I would wait for people in the waiting room because, especially in the heart area where people are having very long surgeries, those people don't have a lot of things to do while they wait for their friends and family to come out of surgery. So that was, unfortunately, a great audience for me to be able to get people to give feedback on the Cleveland Clinic site. So it's a great source if you're in healthcare as a waiting room, if you can get permission to do that. So be creative. Think about where are these people. Try to get them when they're in the right mindset. So if it's auto mechanic type situation, you go to the auto mechanics. Whatever it is, try to get to those people ideally when they're in the moment or around that type of situation. Yes.
But at the same time, selecting your population from the Cleveland Clinic example that you gave, couldn't they be in the wrong mood in the sense they're
Yes.
anxious, they're really not,
Yes.
and they kind of just go along with you for the ride, but at the same time they're really not mentally focused?
Yeah.
You put your qualifying questions, and actually your qualifying question is, why are you here today? If they say, my father's about to die, okay, you don't use them for usability.
It depends. So in this case, we're actually getting information for the Heart Vascular Institute, so their minds needed to be on that to some extent. But to your point, if they're really in bad shape, certainly not. And in other situations, I was working with like the women in I can't remember what the organization is called, the Women's Health Group there. And so then people were waiting for their regular appointments, and some of them may have been very concerned and nervous about that appointment. Maybe it wouldn't have been the right time, but they also asked them, is it okay, that sort of thing. But to your point, people even at the auto repair shop may not be in a good sense of mind if they have to get their whatever redone. So that can be very expensive. All those whatevers. So real people doing real tasks, being observed, prototypes, or working products. Working products are great. But always make sure that you've got work plans to do something about it. You don't want to waste your time testing something that you're never going to get to fix. It's usability, not user testing, and that's to put the focus on the product, on the thing that you're testing. You're not testing people. I don't really want to find out if the person can figure out what I've done. I want to know if the product is responding to their needs, is fulfilling their needs.
At what point in the various agile sprints do you go and do this usability test? Is it towards the end of all the sprints, or is it part of? Constantly,
ideally. So ideally, I would have studies every sprint or every other sprint, and be constantly testing either new ideas that the team's coming up with through the development UX, through the UX pipeline, I should say, or through the development pipeline, stuff that's already been built.
Just to use the same people?
No, ideally I'm using different people. Ideally, I wouldn't use the same person within about 3 to 6 months.
But why not, or why?
Because they can become tainted. They get to know me too well. They get to know the product too well. They're not fresh. And the actual experience of being in a usability state can taint you. You learn. And it's if you go to usertesting.com, it's an online software where you can actually get paid to do usability testing. But usertesting.com, there's no limit on how many tests people can do, and they actually become expert testers, which is good and bad. So we use them a lot. We actually use usertesting.com a lot, but we know that the people on that site are testing potentially 10 to 20 sites a day if they're really very busy people with getting income from that site. And so they know all the standards. They know, and they critique your site from an expert's point of view. So even though I said I wanted accountants with 20 years of experience, they are an accountant with 20 years of experience who also has, 6 months of experience testing websites for accounting. So they're a weird, tiny percentage of all accountants. Like no other, people are actually doing what they're doing. So they're this weird, convoluted set of people. You just might keep that in mind. It's not horrible to use the same people. It's just not ideal.
Because you can't get an idea. Can somebody who's never seen this before figure it out?
Right.
They've seen it before.
They've seen it before. Oh, you changed the button. Nice.
Yeah.
I like that you did that. You learned something. Yeah, you listened to me. That was really cool. And then the other problem with that is now I'm building it for Fred. And I like Fred. Fred's a super nice guy. So I'm just going to keep doing what he says and ignore all the other, it can create some problems. It's not horrible, but it can create problems. Yeah.
Right. Going back to his first question, where does it take place? When does it take place?
Yeah.
It actually, according to what you were looking at before, the parallel development, it actually takes place in the iteration before development.
So if it's a prototype or it's a new idea, the iteration before, yeah. And so you can get some feedback, and then you're giving them a fully baked idea here that's at least been tested with users. You're more confident. You want to get to at least 80% confidence in what you're doing. But then here I'm testing what they developed. So I'm seeing if what they ended up building, because we know they had to change a few things, and we had to move that button, and the things that we tested weren't exactly quite right, so we ended up making some more changes. So now I test that. I see if the stuff that they produce is actually usable by the users.
Then how do you determine whether you're improving or sliding backwards?
Well, people will not be able to do the tasks if you're sliding backwards. So if they can't, so sometimes you'll use the same exact task for multiple studies if you're testing the same area of the product. Okay. And if your failure rate is increasing, if people are failing more often and trying to get that done, then you're sliding backwards. Yeah. Okay. And if people are succeeding more easily, if they're able to complete the task more quickly, then you're doing better.
And how do you determine,
it's subjective.
How do you determine that range? I mean, how do you determine whether, this goes back to the measure thing, how do you determine whether you failed or you passed?
So it's...
What criteria do you use to do that?
So I would say if people are able to complete their task in a reasonable amount of time, and they weren't very frustrated, I've succeeded. Now, if they completed that task and say, that was pretty easy, they hit the easy button, hey, I'm doing great. If they struggled and were frustrated and were like, I just can't figure this out, I'm so stupid, I failed. Like that's not them failing, that's me failing. I've failed them if they are apologizing for their behavior on the site or whatever it is I'm making, that's me failing. That's a clear indication.
So how do you determine what exactly that scope is to assess whether you failed or passed?
Yeah, so usually we set out at the beginning that we have a goal for the study. So the goal is to test the ability for a user to pay a bill on the site. And I'm just using that as an example.
So a business task.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if they're not able to do that, then I failed. My test failed. From objectively, the prototype or the design failed.
So when you have intermediate steps, not just pass or fail, but it took them 3 minutes, it took them 2 minutes. And
yeah. So I do. Depending on the study, I will start to grade 8 or be more like most people struggle, but they're able to get it done. So for an MVP, for a minimum viable product or a first release, everybody can get stuff done. Oh, you're right.
I like that minimal viable product.
Yeah, minimum valuable or viable, depending on your preference. I like valuable, but viable is also a good type. Yeah, you had a question?
I just have a question. I was just going to pursue the other two. So I asked that question once, how do you know whether or not something is successful?
Yeah.
And from what I heard from someone else, he said, we use the 80-20 rule, and 80% of people complete it, then we consider it a success.
Yeah, and you can set, exactly, you can set reasonable goals. 80%, I use that for everything. 80% is good enough. I talked about this. This is a great book if you want to start doing this. Steve Prude, Rocket Surgery Made Easy. It's a great book. Very funny guy, too. He talks about repeatable testing, so just getting it set up so that it's just running all the time. Any method can be adapted. You just need to make it quick and spend a short amount of time trying it out. And if it doesn't work, that's great because you didn't spend a lot of time on it, and you move forward and learn from it. With all of this, you want to tweak, not redesign, as much as possible. So try not to do big changes because you might break something you didn't intend to or that you didn't even know was potentially a problem. If you're tweaking, you're more likely to have successes. And as much as you can, take things away. Reduce the distractions in your product. There was a study done, and I should have looked it up before I came, but there was a study done where they actually reduced the amount of content on a page, and the reaction from the users overall was that they felt like there was more information there. They were able to find more information. And the thought there was that because they've taken away some stuff, people were actually able to see stuff. Because there wasn't so much coming at them. 15 years ago or so, if you think about what Yahoo looked like and what a lot of sites looked like, there was blinking and ads and oh my gosh, every site was just a headache. And most of them have moved to more clean designs because it is easier to see what you actually want to have them see. So if you follow design best practices, if you really focus on specific users, and if you iterate and adjust quickly, you're more likely to have a really, really good solution for your users and to make them really happy. And that's the goal of all of this. So share what you learned. If you've heard the term information radiators, I first heard this from the Lean Dog group many years ago. The idea that you put stuff up and it radiates to the group. So have walls in your offices, if you can, that have information. So put your personas up or your archetypes up. Put up your any information about the users, information that you gathered from them, information that you want to have everybody know. Results from usability studies. Share videos where you can. Protect the privacy of your people, the participants of your studies. But if you can share those videos, a highlight reel of what actually happened, more people will learn from it. So share as much as you can to the audience. Here are a couple recommended readings, and I'll get these posted up on SlideShare today or tomorrow, so that you guys can download these as well. And that's it.
SlideShare where? Or Paralogic?
SlideShare/Paralogic. It's a site with slides. We'll post it, and you can probably get it out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very well. Everyone, let's give Carol a big round.